Welcome, everyone. Open up your bedroom doors. We are with Stella Harris. My name is Jessie Fresh, and we are going to be talking about threesomes this evening. And opening the bedroom doors is dedicated to opening your mind, opening up the window of possibility when it comes to what to explore in your sex life. We often have lots of different ideas and stories connected to the possibilities that we can explore, or we don't even know that they exist. So I know that threesomes is certainly a topic that I myself have been like, how do you do that? How do you go about that? How do I feel comfortable? What are all the ways and dynamics that you can navigate this with ease and have a lot of fun with it and not have a full-on panic attack? And so I love that we're going to talk about this. Usually we start with some kind of boogie, and I actually got caught on YouTube I looked up threesome playlist songs, and I spent a lot of time finding songs that I was like, no. So instead of doing a little boogie, I'm gonna lead us through a little calming breath exercise instead. So if you're open to it, close your eyes. And just notice, without trying to shift anything, what's going on with your breath, what's going on with your body. What is your body language saying to you or communicating to you? And then we're going to fake it till we make it. So we're going to adjust our body posture to be the most relaxed we can possibly get in our space. So this means make any adjustments where there is tension, holding, tightness, and just kind of let it melt. Let it melt even more. And then how could your breath be more pleasurable in this moment? Sometimes pleasurable breath is just an expanded version of what you normally do. So bigger inhales, bigger exhales. And then choose an area on your body that could use some tender loving care, like a massage, some kind of touch, some kind of stretching or movement. And we're just keeping our eyes closed to focus on the breath and the body, to limit distractions, and to tune in. Great. And whatever you are doing, try to do it with just a little bit less effort. Great. And then what would be your cherry on top before you opened your eyes? Anything that you can give to yourself, even if that's like positive self-talk, touch, or a blankie, something external that would make you more comfortable. And then you can open your eyes, which is always the hardest part for me. I just want to crawl into a cocoon now and just like snuggle up. Thanks for joining me, Stella. How are you feeling right now, Stella?
Better than I was 5 minutes ago.
Oh, good. Great. Me too. I feel all fuzzy and like a newborn baby. So thank you all so much for joining live. You can totally type in the chat anytime you want to say hi to us, anytime you want to ask questions, anytime you want to pump us up or give us any thumbs up or hearts so that we know what information is landing with you and what you're learning. I love knowing what people are learning, and the more that you engage in the chat, the more that you will retain of the information that we're discussing. So Stella Stella and I have been friends and acquaintances, and we became even better friends through, we actually we initiated friendship through quarantine of being like, hey, friendly sex educator that I used to see out and about in fun community events. How are you doing? Just checking in on each other. And Stella also teaches at Shebop, one of the places that I lead some workshops. And so we met at I think at like a community witch party. And from there, we have had lots of Zoom time in 2020 and 2021. And Stella just finished completing a book on threesomes. So Stella is the certified expert. Yes. So Stella, will you tell the people who you are, what you do, and anything else you want to share with them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah.
I'm Stella Harris. I am a Portland-based author, sex educator, and coach. And yeah, my new book, The Ultimate Guide to Threesomes, just came out on Tuesday of this week.
Woo!
That's been my big project of the week and month and year. 18 months. It's probably been about 18 months in the making. So at some point there will be a big sigh of relief. I'm still kind of, on the high of it. Yeah, and this is my second book. My first one was Tongue-Tied: Untangling Communication in Sex, Kink, and Relationships. So second book, still hard, it turns out, to write books. But I'm super excited that this is out in the world, and there's still a lot of communication bits in there because that's my favorite part. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm curious why Threesomes was the second book, or what about Threesomes made you like, yes, we need to have more information about this. People need to know more about threesomes.
Well, it's sort of a two-parter, and I suspect that you get this as well. As a sex educator, I would say that threesomes are sort of in the top two most asked about topics. I would say threesomes and butt stuff are the questions I get the most, and a couple of the biggest fantasies that people have that they're not sure how to start in on. So I get asked about threesomes a ton. And so it was on my radar, because that's the question that gets asked. And then, once I started sort of brainstorming what is book 2 going to be, and I'm like, okay, well, I get asked about threesomes all the time. I am an enthusiast. And I did a little research, and there wasn't a lot out there, to my great surprise, as much as threesomes. They come up in surveys again and again as one of the most popular fantasy topics. But in terms of books, there's very little. Sort of the only really serious book about threesomes that's out there is over 10 years old.
Wow. No wonder people.
That's what I said.
Yeah, no wonder.
So it seemed like it was a thing that needed to happen. And so I pitched it to my publisher, and here we are.
Cool! Yay! Here's hats off to you.
Yay!
I obviously need to go to the party store because my party whistle has partied a little too hard. It's supposed to like. There we go.
Oh, there.
Woo!
That is very festive.
Yeah. So can we explore like what threesomes are and what they aren't, and that way people can get like a little bit more honed in on what a threesome is or doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, a threesome is whatever the heck you want it to be. This is one of the things that I explore in the book, is that I feel like not only do we often have a fairly narrow definition of what sex is, but because of that, I feel like it carries over into a narrow definition of what threesomes are.
Yes.
So, we often think sex is only like penetration. It's got to be penis and vagina, right? Which leaves tons of people out of the equation.
Yeah.
And then if that's all we think a threesome is, then that also leaves tons of people out of the equation. And just leaves a lot of flexibility out of the equation.
Yeah.
So what I try to get people to explore is, what would it look like if 3 people were making out or sharing sensual massage or, any sort of experience you want together, even sharing mindful breathing. I mean, anything you want, everything can be heightened by an extra body, an extra pair of hands, the energy of another person. And so that's something I really encourage people to do is have a broad definition, especially at first. There's no reason you need to go all in at first. If it goes well, you can always do it again. But you can't take it back if you end up crossing your own boundaries.
I love that definition.
So a threesome, is anything the heck you say it is, just like sex. What it is not is, it's not a Band-Aid for relationship problems or for, perceived problems in your sex life. Just like trying any flavor of open relationship, it's going to show any cracks that are there. It's not going to patch them up.
Yeah.
So it is not a way, and it's not a way to sort of trick or test your partner. And I say this because that's what's out there. When I was researching, first I was researching, should I even write this book? And then I was researching, like, what do I need to combat that's out there already?
Yeah.
And that is a message that's out there. Like, have a threesome to, like, test your partner. And the only right answer is that either they say no or they ignore the third person and just pay attention to you. And it's such weird, toxic stuff, which is bad for everybody, but especially awful to, trap some poor third person in your mess. Weird relationship tests.
Yeah.
So that's not what a threesome is.
That doesn't sound sexy either. Like being in that scenario for anytime there's not clear intentions or dishonesty or like testing during sex is going to create like an energy of that, which does not feel sexy. It feels really difficult to be sexy because then you're just stuck in your head a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah. And it's not something to do if you're not enthusiastic about it, right? I mean, as you say, you can tell the energy of it. People can tell sometimes. I mean, I guess that's something else. It's not just a way to please somebody else. I hear from people like, oh, my partner really wants this, and so I want to do it for them.
Yeah.
Right. But we never want anyone forcing themselves to have any kind of sex they're not into. And I mean, again, that is true for any kind of sex. And I feel like it gets extra complicated in a threesome scenario. Are you, so are you actually saying you're going to have sex someone you don't want to have sex with just to make another person happy? Like, not only is that terrible for you, but it's going to build resentment for your partner. And the other person is going to tell. I don't know if you've ever kissed somebody who didn't really want to be kissing you, let alone having sex with you. But like, that's just going to be terrible for everybody involved. But I hear about it. It's out there. And when I'm talking to clients, I hear from folks, and I'm sure you hear this as well with your clients, like people will be turned off of a particular act because of that one time they tried it under significantly non-optimal circumstances. And then that spoils the whole thing for them. So that one time in college, they did it for a partner and everything about it was bad. And so now they assume whatever it is, whether it's anal sex or threesomes, like that thing is bad because that time I did it was for the wrong reasons.
You're bringing up, so I'm like, oh, this is why threesomes don't feel simple because there is to do them in a way that feels really good for everyone involves negotiation of what everyone's boundaries are, and to negotiate you have to communicate. And being able to communicate about consent. So no wonder people are like, yeah, I hear these are cool, let's try. And then it's like potential war zone, possibly.
And this is sort of the secret reason that I wrote the book, which is that when you have the carrot of threesomes, then I can get people to read a book that is, in fact, 70% about communication and 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 all that other good stuff that makes any sex worth having.
Yes. Yes.
But if you have the promise of a threesome at the end, people will jump through the hoops.
Yes.
If you just say, hey, let's learn about consent, I have learned this as a sex educator.
Yeah.
If you just say, hey, let's learn about this consent, you get like 5 really well-meaning people in the room. And if I say, hey, let's learn about threesomes, I get like 50 people in the room.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's all the branding for consent of how you can get people in the room. And threesomes is such a great way to be like, ooh, yay, this mysterious, exotic, exciting thing. And here are some great skills that you have to learn along the way to make it great.
Right. And I mean, I'm not just tricking people to read about consent. Like that is in fact an essential element to having a great threesome. Like that is true.
Yes.
But yeah, it is one of the essential skills.
Amazing. Someone said another communication book disguised as a sex book.
Yeah. There's a whole chapter just on positions, I promise.
Oh, good. You had to have that in there. So I would love if both of us could share like one of our favorite examples or personal stories about a threesome that was like so beautiful and fun and exciting. If you're open to that, I have one that came up today randomly, and I was like, that was an amazing experience. Amazing. Specifically to speak to what you had said about like threesomes can be anything that you want and anything that you agree upon and negotiate. And I think to kind of give other people ideas of like, yeah, this is possible. You can totally have a threesome and this counts as a threesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plus, I think I just want to read your diaries about all the group sex that you've had.
Well, luckily I publish a lot of that.
So. Amazing.
Yeah. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first because I feel someone said I have butterflies. Great. We're just lingering in the anticipation. So I just have to share that threesomes have scared the poo out of me in the past. They have triggered my fear of abandonment, and therefore anytime they were brought up, it was a state of fear that I then was in rather than like, ooh, this is fun. And it actually wasn't until I started working on my fear of abandonment that I was able to step beyond the fear and negotiate what it is that I wanted. And the way that this particular threesome showed up is that I was at a coaching event in, I won't say the date because then it might give too much away. I was at a coaching event before COVID, and I was sharing a room with someone, and it was our last night at our coaching event. And the sex coaching community that I am a part of, a lot of everyone that I have interacted with plays really, really well with negotiation and boundaries because that's professionally what we are practicing. Mm-hmm. And my roommate was like, I really want to get flogged before I go back to the tiny little area that I live in. And I really need that. Would you be willing to have our room be a space that allows for that? It's our last night. What do you say? And I was like, well, I'm really tired. I think I'm going to watch Game of Thrones while you get flogged next to me. Man, was I kidding myself. So while I heard them negotiating, I had my earphones in. I was like trying to watch Game of Thrones, and I hear them talking about the negotiation, and I'm like, damn, this is going to be really hard to pay attention to Game of Thrones. Like let's see how I can negotiate my own boundaries in this with my low energy and how I can be in this. So we all stated all of our boundaries beforehand and talked about the things that we wanted to include. We talked about the things that were on limits or off limits, and then like heck yes to. And it ended up being such a fun experience where I got to experience new edges for me of giving to other people, but also completely feeling taken care of in what my needs and wants were. My body was not involved in terms of like penetration or even sexual stimulation. I received some flogging, but the entire experience, every single person got to have exactly what they said they wanted because we negotiated that. And that was just so beautiful to me. All of us at the end were like, that was amazing. That was so fun. We got to get really creative in it as well because of that negotiation piece. And afterwards, I was like, I was just in a threesome. Amazing. And I think my old self would be like, that's not a threesome because you didn't have penetrative sex with everyone in the space. But it still counts. We had a lot of sex in different ways. So that was my like mind blown experience of like platonic. It was a platonic threesome as well. I was not romantically interested in anyone, which was a new thing for me. That felt really cool. Like, yay! I don't feel abandoned. I don't have any trigger or fear around that. So that was super duper cool. It's just like community helping out community, which feels so weird to say, but yes. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thanks. Now I feel very vulnerable. Let me take a sip. Yeah.
Conferences are really great threesome or orgy opportunities. Yeah.
What?
So for folks always ask, how do I have a threesome? Go to some conferences.
You got to go to the right conference, you know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was at a kink conference once, and the other conference that was happening at the same hotel at the same time was a yo-yo conference. And I don't know this for sure, but in my fantasies, there was some behind the scenes crossover. I am hoping that is true.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You just popped in a whole new set of ideas in what is possible. Like yo-yos.
Right? What kind of skills are those folks bringing? I don't even know.
Lots of finger skills, you know, they're like flinging it down and they're like doing the cross stuff, and there's for sure some overlap of skills.
Yeah.
Stella, what's your story, or a story that you feel like is coming up that you're willing to share?
Yeah, well, your story made me think of a couple of opportunities that are sort of in the like friends helping friends kind of category. And I love that idea again because there's so many things that threesomes can look like. So I guess the one I will tell you about was I had a couple of friends. I'm still friends with these people. A couple of friends I know from the kink scene, who I know as, I mean, in a bunch of ways, but like it sort of started as like rope bondage lesson buddies.
Yeah.
And we would like get together to practice rope stuff. And one of the things that came up as we were practicing rope stuff, it was with a cis man and a cis woman. And the woman mentioned that she was curious about other women, but didn't have a lot of experience and felt really intimidated and didn't know what to do. And so this rope practice time that the three of us were doing turned into the fella teaching his partner hand sex techniques with me as like the demo model.
Yes.
And it was super sexy. It was super hot. Like everyone had a great time. And yes, we did all of the negotiations before we like took our clothes off and changed up the what we'd said we were getting together for. But it was super hot. And I think it's sort of a particular kink of me. Like maybe it's because I'm an educator, but I'm like, you want to learn a thing with my body? Like, heck yes, I am here for it. And because it was framed as educational, there was also not, and this is a thing I have carried over actually into client work and into my teaching. I say, when you're trying to learn a new thing, don't call it sex. Because as soon as you call it sex, there is this like all of this baggage comes with it. And like, okay, you're like, quote unquote, supposed to have an orgasm and all this stuff is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But if it's just about experimentation or learning a new skill, then you can just workshop some stuff.
we're just having a little like one-on-one workshop right now. I love that.
Yeah, it's just like, a couple of friends learning some stuff and like, oh, whoops, your whole hand is going to end up in my vagina. That's fine.
When
Yeah, and I mean, I did end up having an orgasm and having a lot of fun, and it was great all around. And like I said, we, are all still good friends. And continued being rope practice buddies. And that was just kind of a like, all right, that time we did that, and other times we do other things. Yeah, and I'm interested in the way that you said it was platonic, and I would say like it was definitely sexy, and also it was platonic in that we went into it as friends, we came out of it as friends. It was a sexy and sensual environment, but it didn't like change our fundamental relationship with each other.
Yeah.
But I think, who gets to decide? I get to decide because it was my vagina, right? So it was like, was it sex? Sure. Like, so it counts as a threesome because I say it counts. There were 3 people and somebody was inside me. And yeah, but like all the lights were on and neither of them was naked, but they were all up in my business and I was really enjoying myself. Yeah.
That's so amazing.
Yeah. And I don't, neither of these I don't think is in the book, but sort of the other sort of friends helping friends that I thought of when you were telling your story is there was actually a time I sort of helped a couple of other friends just jumpstart their sex. A kinky friend of mine was trying to teach her very sweet, very vanilla partner about impact play. And he was willing, but had no experience and had a lot of the like, oh, well, you're not supposed to hit people stuff, which is a good impulse to have. And he is a big dude and she is a tiny girl. And she kept trying to get him to hit her. And he's like, was being very delicate. And they came and met me at a sex club at a party that I was hosting. And the 3 of us went to a private room and I spent maybe 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, buddy, when she says hit me, this is what she means. And, I used my bare hands. I used a couple of toys. I hit her really hard and his eyes went wide and he's like, oh, yeah, I can do that. And then I just left. And they were in that room for a few more hours.
Oh my God. I love that.
And this was years ago, and happily ever after have kinked on their own. And again, like super platonic spanking of one of my best friends, platonic. But yeah, like sometimes you just need to help a friend out and show their partner how to hit them.
Sex jump.
Yeah, so like I was there for like 5 minutes, but it totally counts. And yeah, friends helping friends.
When you said like a jump start to their vanilla sex, I literally thought of you like mowing the lawn and like pulling
and
that.
Cannot hear you right now, Jessie.
Whoa. What's happening? Can you hear me now? No? One moment. One sec.
Oh, now it's just me. Hey, y'all. Thanks for hanging out.
Am I back? Can you hear me? No.
Is it just me, y'all? Somebody chime in chat. Is this my problem or did Jessie go away for y'all?
Yeah, tell me if Stella and I just can't hear each other or what's going on. I can still hear. What the heck?
You can hear me? This is weird.
Let me try my headphones. Maybe the headphone jack will do something. We can hear Jessie. Okay. Wow. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Oh, I suddenly can't hear the other person. Any idea why that would be?
Interesting.
Should I log out and come back?
Yeah, yes. Try that.
All right. I will log out and be right back.
Okay.
Why would that happen?
I know. Well, I'm glad that you can hear both of us and that we can like interact in this way so that we know that Stella and I just aren't speaking to ourselves on our own. I love that this conversation has gotten into the idea of platonic threesomes because, in a sense, like platonic threesomes in my mind, where you don't have a lot of romantic attachment to the other people, can be somewhat helpful because the stakes are much lower. Your feelings of like protecting your relationship and your feelings of like allowing someone else to come in my like fear of abandonment past history, that would feel really good of like, I can't get abandoned because these are my two friends. So great. I also can't get any weird feelings of rejection. At least that seems to be mitigated. So I'm curious, something that I would love to hear something that you've learned so far from listening to this that you'd like to apply in your sex life at some point. And hopefully Stella told me that her internet was being a little funky. So we'll see if logging back on helps. And I'm also going to come back through the chat a little bit because I didn't get to read everything and I want to interact with y'all. Depending on the episode, there might not have been much difference between flogging and Game of Thrones. Yes. We're actually going to have an opening the bedroom doors with a flogging professional. So that is going to come up. We're really trying to figure out how to actually have a demo of flogging where we don't get shut down, where it's all COVID safe. And so we're negotiating and figuring out like how to do that and who gets to be flogged. So that's coming up. I think that's going to be in April. Thank you all so much for sharing, like for rooting me on when I was talking about what felt vulnerable. Can you hear me now, Stella? Yay! Okay, great. Yay.
I don't know what happened there, but thanks for rolling with it.
Yeah, thanks for you rolling with it and just being able to like speak to the chat to see what the heck's going on. Yeah. Yeah. Where were we? I highlighted for them that the idea of platonic friend threesomes to me feels less high stakes and more comfortable to, especially speaking to that fear of abandonment, that it like, there's no fear of abandonment when it's platonic and when it's friends. So that was just a realization that I was having. And I asked them like what they've learned along the way so far and what they want to apply. So,
and that's one of the big questions I hear from folks. If they're thinking about having a threesome, it's the friend versus stranger. And everyone feels strongly about it, but there's no consensus.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But I'm with you on the friend front. I love having sex with my friends because of the built-in trust and safety piece.
Yeah.
But I totally understand why people want someone outside of their circle as well.
For sure. Yeah. Ooh. Can we talk about what feels good about threesomes that keeps us wanting to have threesomes? Like the why it's awesome, what or more of what's we've already been on the what's awesome topic, but like what else is awesome about it that that we haven't touched on. Now so many ideas are flooding in. So
yeah. So I quote early in my book, I quote Justin Lehmiller's recent study that he published in his book, Tell Me What You Want, where group sex came up as the #1 fantasy of American adults. And in his analysis of that, one of the reasons he talks about is a lot of stimulation.
yeah.
That's something I hear from a lot of folks. It's an opportunity for additional stimulation. And that threesomes also tap into what comes up again and again for what people want from any sort of ongoing sexual relationship, right? People want novelty.
Yes.
And yes, you can 100% try new things with the same person. Bringing a new person in is instant novelty. Bringing in a new person with a different or new skill set, a different body type, a different gender, a different sexuality, different genitals, all of that, right? So it's just such an easy sort of shortcut towards novelty. So that's a huge one.
Yes.
For folks, like me, who are just really enthusiastic about humans and bodies in general, it is a lovely way to sort of celebrate like differences and contrasts between people.
Yeah.
And just enjoying like this person's really curvy and this person is really muscly, and I can like have my hands on them both at the same time, and what's not to love about that. So it can feel to me like a really like a celebration of bodies and body types and sexualities. Again, if you just have a bunch of people in the room at once, 3 or more, whatever you want to do at once.
Yeah.
So that feels great. And sort of as what we were starting to talk about, it can be a great way to bring in a new skill set. Like if you're interested in things, it's a great way to get sort of hands-on lessons. If you're about different sexualities or bodies, it can feel less intimidating. Basically, if you bring a buddy, right? Like,
yeah.
And I get this a lot from clients who, want to try a different kind of sex and they're afraid they won't be good at it. Something I kind of don't believe in and want to unpack, but the fear is real. So trying that on the buddy system, like in the threesome I mentioned, like that can feel really helpful.
For sure.
Yeah. So there's the threesomes have a ton of things going for them.
Yeah, they do.
Threesomes or group sex. And like anything else, I always want to say, I don't really believe in the idea of a sexual bucket list. Like, I think threesomes can be great, and also they are not for everyone. And if they're not for you, that's okay. And it's not like you're missing out on some peak sexual experience that everybody but you is having.
Yeah.
Like, there are a bunch of different ways to explore your sexuality. There's not a right and wrong way. So if this isn't for you, that is just as valid and just as okay.
Thank you so much for saying that, because before I had a threesome, I was like pressuring myself a lot to have one and thinking that was some kind of standard of like sexual liberation of like, if I don't have a threesome, or if I can't have a threesome, if I'm not capable or if I don't feel safe doing that, then I'm not sexually liberated, which is so not true. So.
Yeah, I just wrote about this idea because, I keep getting asked to comment on articles about very specific sex acts. And I have become such a jaded sex educator. My first response to everything has just become, it's overrated.
Oh gosh, I love that.
So I just wrote a whole article about like, it's overrated and that's okay. Because it's not about like the position or the act. It always ends up being about the people, right?
Yeah.
So a threesome is no fun if you are not excited about the people and the energy. And, the first time I think I said this, it was in an article about sex underwater. It's like, well, all that's going to do is like mess up your lubrication, and there's really no point unless it's like you're super excited about the person. But it is easier clickbaity advice to say, try this like quote unquote wild sex thing, than to say, work on your intimacy, work on your connection, and your communication, right? Nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
So I think all of these things are great and fun, and I love them. And kind of like I said about the book, it's sort of the carrot at the end of the stick of having solid connections, feeling good about the people, feeling good about yourself and how you're embodying your sexuality. And then all of these things are options and not required and not better than any other kind of sex. They're not better than sex with one person or sex by yourself.
Yes.
That's freaking great. And stick with that if that's what you're happy with. Or also not wanting any sex at all.
Yeah.
Totally fine.
Yes.
So yeah, I want to talk about all this stuff like as one of the many things you can do. And also you're not missing out if you don't want to.
Yeah. No FOMO.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought of that probably is interwoven into what feels awesome about threesomes that I've experienced is the amount of creativity that has shown up. Like the collaborative creativity that shows up is like magic. When everyone feels safe, when everyone feels like good about their boundaries being met and their needs being met, it is like explosive creativity, or just creativity that you're like, I never thought of doing that, or I never thought that me watching them lick that on their body part is going to inspire me to then do something else or the exact same thing. Yeah, so that like collaborative inspiration has been super duper fun, of like, phew, definitely novel, definitely different, so exciting, and just feels so good. Yeah.
Collaborative has become one of my favorite words for this.
Yeah.
And potentially sort of one of the potential pitfalls of a threesome is if you go into it with, I have this very specific fantasy choreographed in my head, then that's not going to be collaborative, right? Because one of the benefits is you're bringing in a brand new person's ideas, and they probably have great ideas and great fantasy. And if you're just trying to direct the whole thing, you miss out on that. You miss out on that collaboration, which is, I think, one of the main benefits.
I mean, that sounds like a great rule to sex in general, unless it's like a scene that's set to be a very specific thing. Whenever, like, I can sense when I am coming to sex and I have some kind of idea of how it's going to go or some kind of expectation, and I can read that within someone that I'm interacting with instantly, and it totally kills spontaneity. Like, expectations kill spontaneity and collaboration.
Yeah.
Okay, people are learning things. So they said, I've learned that I'm not alone, that there are so many different ways to engage, being part of a jump start or exploring and learning and having the conversation about desires, wildest to mildest. Oh, I like that. Someone said a threesome should be with friends, not in a relationship together, unless their relationship is a strong relationship between the couple. I agree. Secretly listening while at work. Ooh, love that. That makes my tail wag. Right, you must be excited about each other. Yeah. Yay. Okay, great. People are learning things. For someone, I feel like maybe I haven't had enough experience, but I feel like each new threesome is like a beginner's lesson, in a sense that it's a beginner's mind is helpful, because they're never going to go the same way. So is there advice that you would give to people, regardless if this is their first threesome or they feel like, yeah, we got this down?
Be curious. I feel like this is true no matter how many people are involved. You by yourself, one person, two people, three people, a room full of people. Yeah, be curious about what's going to happen. Be curious about the other people. Be flexible. Be willing to improvise. The more committed you are to a particular outcome, the trickier it can be. And I've experienced this with sex, with kink. Like, there have been plenty of times, especially with kink, especially when I was like sort of at the peak of my rope bondages obsession. I would have a very particular idea of how something was going to go. And sometimes the person I was going to play with would show up and say, like, oh, by the way, here's the thing you should know about my body. Would be something like, I can't bend my knees. And then everything I had planned was out the window. and I had to improvise,
Mm,
and it was always better because of it.
for sure. Yeah.
And that is part of why I plan less now. And obviously, I mean, it has been a year now since I have been to a sex party, but you know, a year ago when I was doing this, I basically stopped bringing my bag of toys. And I just thought, if something is going to happen, I'm going to improvise. I'm going to use what I have built in. We'll figure it out as we go.
Hands built in.
Yeah, right? Like, we've
Yeah.
got a lot to work with. And the more I sort of planned or anticipated a specific outcome, the more it felt like it actually inhibited the ultimate experience.
Yeah.
And I see this specifically in threesomes with people who've been fantasizing about a threesome for a long time. They get there and then they're the choreographer. They're like, okay, now you do this and now do that and now do this to me.
Yeah.
And they are the director or the choreographer, and they are not being present in the moment.
Yeah.
And missing a lot of the experience.
Yeah.
So be curious, be willing to improvise. That I think has been a big lesson for me.
I love that you highlighted that being like you were saying things and I was like, ooh, I'm translating them into my own like nerdiness of sex relating, and that what I heard you say is that by being in flow state, like the just being in the full present moment. I'm dorking out on this in my life right now too, like how to feel creatively charged by being in the moment and allowing yourself to get really curious and find, or not even find, to just allow for creativity and ideas and pleasure to show up, not rushing it, not expecting anything from it, not choreographing or directing. I am such a director when it comes to my own sexual engagement, and the director hat is literally something that I could benefit from, being like, okay, taking this off, thank you, and we're just gonna be like in the flow with it. So I love your highlight of that, of like getting in the moment is the magic.
And that's difficult. Like, I do want to say, like,
it's
if anybody
my
doesn't
life's
feel
work.
like they're there yet, it's not like that's easy.
No, there's so many. That's my whole career, is like how to teach you to get in flow state with all the, like, by dismantling beliefs that are taking you along the way, or having tools to get you into your body, and it's always a practice.
And this has been my full-time job for like 8 years, and I am still not always there, even in my personal life. Like, I get, you know, sometimes in interviews, people are like, try to make it aspirational. It's like, well, how do we have sex like you? I'm like, don't do that. I don't have it figured out yet, actually. Like, I can tell you the things I'm working on. And also, there's a bunch of stuff I'm still working on. Like, I have all my own stuff. And no, I don't always get out of my own way or out of my own head. Like, there are the things that I think are a good idea, and also I have not mastered them.
Yes, I'm right there with you. That it's always a practice, and there's always more to learn. And even the tools that you do collect are like, oh, these tools aren't working in this moment because for some other reason.
And it can almost be worse. And I've talked to so many other sex educators and sex coaches about this. Again, when you think you're in the, like, quote unquote, supposed to be good at this, you get so in your own way, because you kind of, like, it takes a minute to integrate that, like, this isn't working.
It's like a halting or a screeching halt. That's like, wait, oh, I'm just listening to the narration in my mind. And there's that awareness point of when you become aware of your experience versus like just being in your experience. I see a comment here that I'm like, ooh, this is a great talking point. Someone said, as someone with a really active fantasy life, it seems like it would be really difficult to set those ideas I've had for so long aside and just go with the flow. I have some ideas around that. part of that threesome that I shared with you in the beginning was very much we all discussed what our intentions were and what we would like to show up. And so we got to name some of those things. Like, I would love if I got to receive this, this, and this. I would love for all, like, so I'm trying to get more descriptive without feeling like too vulnerable. Like, my examples were, I would love to be able to like dom the other person and to be incorporated in this, receive flogging, and also have a lot of fun and maybe play with psychological kink. And the other two people were like, yeah, great. That sounds great. And so that just planted a seed of an intention of like, yeah, I don't know how that's going to show up, but everyone agrees that they would enjoy that, or they think that they would enjoy that. So therefore, we'll see how that shows up organically. That was helpful at not being like, okay, now I'm going to direct this. It was just like, let's see how it shows up while I am in the flow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on the like director hat versus like, I want to accomplish this fantasy, so because I've thought about it so much.
Right. Well, going with the flow doesn't mean you can't ever try to realize your fantasies. I absolutely think that in the negotiation phase, you could say like, hey, I have this idea. I think this would be really hot. Propose it to the other people. If they're into it, you start doing the thing.
Yeah.
Like, by all means, try to bring your fantasies to life. And also, if in the moment they are not going exactly the way you imagined them, that's sort of the trick of, okay, this isn't exactly what I had in mind, but do I want now in the moment to tweak things a little bit, or do I want to enjoy what's actually happening? And that's the choice point. And you always, of course, want to, speak up for your boundaries, speak up for your and needs. And also you want to know the difference between that and the mental fantasy. So start with the fantasy and then decide which points are flexible. So both. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try to experience your fantasies.
Yeah.
And, if you cultivate a friend group of sex positive folks, like, you can absolutely get a group of people help you live out your fantasies. I've been in plenty of scenarios where it's like, hey, I have this fantasy. Actually, twice now, this has been the same fantasy with different people. Hey, I have this fantasy of a bunch of people just putting their boobs on me.
Yes.
And twice I've been in a group of people that have been like, heck yeah, we're going to do that. And we've just like covered somebody with boobs.
Yes, a boob burial.
Right? Who doesn't want to be covered with boobs? So like, ask for that. And again, like, that takes like 5 minutes,
Yeah.
And then comes the improvising and whatever comes next.
Yeah.
But yes, ask for your fantasies, do your fantasies. And also, like, if in that moment that people said like, actually, I'm not comfortable with that, but how about this other thing? Like, which is better? Like digging in your feet and saying, oh, I only want this one thing. Or realizing that something else potentially really interesting is on offer.
You're also bringing up this point that checking in, I think that people think that like, ooh, like it's threesome time, like here we go, we're beginning, and we don't need to check in. Or that checking in is going to kill the mood or kill the sexiness of it. But I have found that checking in small little ways, of like, for instance, one time during another threesome, one of the people kept having to pee. And so anytime that person had to pee, me and the other person would be like, hey, how's it going for you? Is there anything else you'd like more of? Anything less of? Like, how's your energy levels? And then that third person would walk back in the room and would be like, yes, like it's back on. So openly communicating and checking in, especially to make sure that you're continuing to go in a direction that you enjoy. So helpful. Yeah. I see people doing or asking a question. Stella, any suggestions as to how to go about finding potential threesome partners?
Yes. So I think I have like 2 chapters on this in the book, but basically the
Yay!
chapters are like in person and online.
Yeah.
In person is a little trickier these days.
Yeah.
I am optimistic that sometime later this year that will be a thing again.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, the 2 main ways online. And again, this is another article I just wrote about actually on my Substack, because my sweetie is a great sport. They actually downloaded like half a dozen different threesome apps and tested them for me because I don't have that kind of bandwidth.
Oh, threesome apps. Cool.
You can read about that on splash.substack.com. But so basically, the internet is a great way to meet people. And right now, it is a great way to meet people and play the long game. Do your Victorian style courting right back and forth for a while until you are up for meeting. But the great thing about the apps is that they have sort of pre-filtered for people who are theoretically up for threesomes or group sex, right? So you don't have to deal with the awkward approaching your friends, approaching a stranger at the grocery store. Like, you know, if they're on the app, they're at least theoretically up for the thing. Maybe not with you. Theoretically, they're up for it. So at least asking is okay. So apps are one of my favorite ways to do it. That's one of the ways I have met a lot of threesome buddies, specifically when I'm unicorning. So if I'm the single person joining a couple, I have met couples that way. Again, pre-COVID, but there are couples I'm still in contact with that I met that way. So I think that is a really great tool.
That's fantastic. Someone was like, we need an app for this, or many people, enough people to be like, yeah, and I'm joining.
Yeah, and now there are a bunch of them. And also you can still use OkCupid or Tinder or anything like that. Just say what you're looking for, and you know, the people who want that will filter for it, and the people who don't won't, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 2 winners from our recent experiment were Field and Open. But yeah, and there's actually actually I think that the couple that is like my pre-pandemic regular couple was just from Tinder because, you know, sometimes stick with the basics. They bring over dessert. We have sex. Like, what's not to like about it?
I love the dessert part.
Right? It's perfect.
Yeah.
So then we have the like, it gets us back out of bed. It helps smooth the transition like out the door.
Yeah, I love that.
So I get dessert and sex. Really, there's nothing not to like about that. So
it's the aftercare.
It is absolutely like chocolate mousse based aftercare.
Yes.
You know, we pet my dog. Everybody wins. And I know the internet is not for everyone, and the in-person route, which I am a fan of, is trickier at the moment. And it is like, it depends what level of effort you're willing to put in. But joining sex positive and kinky communities, like going to meetups, like, I don't know if all of y'all are in Portland or not, but Google whatever your town is, plus open relationship, swinger, sex positive, kink, sex club, all of those terms. This stuff is everywhere. So find the meetups, find the events. If you go to play parties, you go to sex clubs, you suddenly have a room full of people who are at least potentially up for it. It doesn't mean they will be into you necessarily, but again, it is at least appropriate to ask politely, as long as you're going to take no for an answer. So cultivating those relationships, those communities, those friendships. And I also really advocate for people kind of checking with their existing friend group. Like, a lot of people don't talk about sex with their friends. But throw a party where you know, especially like right now, throw a virtual party where you all get together and watch something like Mystery Box Show or Body Storytelling. And then get on your own Zoom after and talk about it. And then suddenly you're talking to all of your friends about sex. And you will find out if you have orgy friends. Because you probably do. And that is a good way to get an into some of these communities.
I love that. That's such great advice. Someone else asked about partnerships. Like, let's see, they said, with your first two stories, were either of you in relationships? And if so, how did that work out? Without your partner being there to check in if it was okay. I went to that convention knowing that non-romantic, what is that? The P word? Platonic sex was on the table, possibly. And so I negotiated before I left. I said, hey, I'm going for like a week and we're all learning about sex. And this is what I would really enjoy to, I would love to participate in some things if I myself feel comfortable. What that looks like to me is I probably wouldn't have penetrative sex with anyone because I don't feel comfortable with that. And I would be open to like people exploring my body and like touching my labia, but not necessarily penetrating, and trying anything else that feels good to me. How does that feel to you? And we talked about that and negotiated, and then they got to be like, great, you're going to be out of town. How do you feel about me doing this, this, and this? And I was like, well, yeah, let's negotiate that. So it was a fun novelty experience for both of us.
Nice.
Yeah. How about you, Stella?
So I've been in a lot of different kind of relationships in my life. For the last 9 or 10 years, definitely within the span of both of the stories that I told, I have been polyamorous. I've been in open relationships, and primarily I have identified as solo poly. Means that I have had multiple partners without sort of hierarchy in theory, although it works out in practice sometimes that I see some people more than others. But the way it has worked out for me is that I have not been in relationships where I need any kind of permission first. The agreement that I have had, you know, for the last decade or so is everybody is a free agent, and also for physical and emotional safety before sex happens, I want to know if there have been exposures. So when I have had the stories like the ones that I've talked about before, the next time I have sex with other partners again, there's always the safer sex talk. There's a check-in. There's, hey, I have done X, Y, and Z. And sometimes that has changed our safer sex practices. Sometimes it hasn't. But I always let people know if anything sort of in the status quo is different. But yeah, for the last 10 years or so, I have not done a check-in first style. For a while, not relevant to the stories that I told, but for a while, I had been monogamously married for a while. And then for the last couple of years of that marriage, we were in an open marriage, but a bit more hierarchical. And there was some checking in first. So there was, hey, X, Y, and Z was proposed to me. How do you feel about that? Type of check-in. So that sort of thing is certainly possible as well. And that is something I talk about in both books, is basically how do you unpack what your agreements are? Because every relationship has agreements. And also where you get into trouble is sort of the unspoken ones, when they are unspoken agreements that you haven't actually agreed to out loud. And that can especially happen, you know, when you start from monogamy land, and also it can happen in any relationship. So I definitely suggest that if you do have partners, you have an explicit conversation of like, hey, what are your expectations of this relationship? What are your expectations about disclosure of what happens in other relationships? And see if you can just think about every expectation you have and get it out in the open. I like getting everything in writing because I'm a nerd. Like, I like taking notes about stuff. So I like journaling about all of this. What are your beliefs? What are your expectations? What are your needs? What are your wants? But yes, more recently, I have been a little bit more freeform and just sort of let people know what applies to their needs and safety.
Thank you for sharing that. That made me like, oh my gosh, we did not emphasize the Can you hear me now?
And now I can't hear you.
Again? Okay. Can people hear me on the other side?
What?
Stella's going to hop back on, I think, hopefully, so that we can kind of wrap this up and close this out. I wanted to share with you the STARS talk, which is a abbreviation for a talk that is encouraged to happen before having sexual activity with someone. And Stella and I could have emphasized more that before engaging with people in a sexual way, I am checking in with STI status, how their STI status and mine can co-collaborate safely and play within the color and the lines of what we want to do. Great, you can still hear me. Okay, I think Stella's maybe having an audio issue or something. So the STARS talk, I'll post that in the Opening the Bedroom Doors as a resource. But first you go over sexually transmitted infection status, like when were you last tested, what were your results, and how can we play within those results that feel safe to both of us. The T is for turn-ons, like what are the things that you really, really enjoy and want to explore. The A is what do you want to avoid, like parts of your body, emotional triggers, anything. Stella, I'm launching you back in, but I'm telling them about the different stars, like part of the STARS talk, because we kind of were going there. So I'm on A of avoids. What sexually you want to avoid, what emotional triggers, and any no-goes. And then the R is relationship intentions, like what is the intention of this threesome, or what's the intention after this, and any communication preferences, like, yeah, after this threesome, it'd feel really good if we all checked in like immediately after, and then maybe like a day after, and then a week after. And then any of your safe sex etiquette of like, are you using condoms, barriers, gloves, discussing like what happens if anyone gets pregnant. So I'll put that in our group so that you have that. It's such a great way to open up the conversation of like, hey, have you heard of the STARS talk? Like everybody's doing it. We can easily go over these things. And I want you to know that when I have used that in threesome settings, it takes less than like 15 minutes to go over those things for 3 people. So it doesn't have to be this long thing. It is like here's my bullet list. How can we all negotiate this?
Yeah.
Yeah. I while you were dealing with audio stuff, I emphasized the use of going over like STI status before a threesome happens, because I didn't emphasize that I didn't highlight that as much as I would have liked to in my story recap. So, yeah.
Yeah, both of my stories were like hands only, which is one of my favorite kinds of sex
Me
to have,
too.
both for pleasure and for safety.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that happens with threesomes or group sex is it does get trickier to remember what went where. So like, did you go down on one person and now you're kissing another person? Like, whose gender have you touched with your hands? I agree with you. Like gloves, I know a lot of people think gloves are a weird step to take. I
love gloves.
I am very pro glove, especially in group sex.
They feel so good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm at the point that I've got the Pavlovian response that like if somebody snaps on a glove, I'm like, ooh, something good is going to happen. Which makes it weird when I actually go to the doctor.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm super pro glove. You don't want to have to run to the bathroom every 5 minutes between everybody you touch. So yeah, definitely gloves. And sometimes if not everybody in the room wants to exchange fluids, it's also sometimes nice to just like take oral sex off the table so that everybody can make out without worrying about where their mouths have been. It can be helpful to just set the sexual safety boundaries in the room across the board to the most stringent boundaries. Because if like 2 people want to exchange fluids, but the third doesn't, then you need to be mindful all night of whose what has been where. And that is super easy to forget. The more people, the easier it gets to forget. At least
Will
one
you
person in the chat likes the rubber gloves like me.
Yeah. I think that I did not realize that rubber gloves are sensual. Like I put them on, like really nice fitting black gloves, and I was like, these feel like nothing I've ever felt before. They're so soft. They feel so like, look at what lube does in them. Oh my gosh. So they're exciting.
And it helps you conserve lube because your probably dry hands won't
Yeah,
absorb
absorbing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Will you share, Stella, how people can get your book, and how I know that you have a class coming up on hand sex and beyond. So how can people? Yeah, it's perfect. Perfect.
You're
segue.
so on top of it. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, let's do your marketing right now.
Yeah. So yeah, I have this whole book about threesomes.
Yes.
You can get it from my website if you go to stellaharris.net/books. You can get it from my local sex toy store, Shebop. It's listed on their website. You can get it from my local bookstore, Powell's. You can even get it from Amazon if that's your jam. They have it at Barnes and Noble. Probably other bookstores and sex stores as well. I just haven't checked. This Wednesday, I am teaching a hand sex class with my friend and fellow sex educator, Gretchen. So that's good times. We've done that one a few times, and that's always fun. I'm also doing a class about threesomes for kink.com on April 25th. I have a handful of things coming up. It's always all listed on my website. And if you can find more stuff on my website, on my newsletter, all of those places. And I'm available on all of the various social media. I'm very Googleable. So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you hang out. The name of the book, someone is asking, is The Ultimate, there's a lot of glare. There we go. The Ultimate Guide to Threesomes.
With some juicy pairs. Yes.
With a And it took me longer than I would like to admit to understand the irony of a threesome of pairs, but there we are.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here with us, Stella. This has been so fun. And like I was like, oh, threesomes, like they feel like a very like sort of vanilla topic, but there's so much more to that I learned that they're not vanilla at all. They're like the allspice of spices. So thank you. Like they're I was like, oh, threesomes, Yeah, they're the allspice. If anyone is wanting to join me on some classes that I have coming up on next Wednesday, I'm hosting a class with Self Serve that is teaching you all about what it means to be an empath or a highly sensitive person, and how to rock your sex and sensuality with having that high sensitivity. So that's going to be on Wednesday at 5 p.m. I'll post information in our group. Stella, you can share anything you want in the group as in terms of like how people can get your book and how they can contact you. And thank you all so much for joining us. We had such a large number of people that stayed till the end. So thank you all so much. You've been amazing. Yay, I see so many thank yous. Yeah, they're like, what is the name of the book again? Okay. I'm going to put a link in the group of what your book is.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us.
Yeah. Good night, everybody. Yay, I love that. Okay, we're logging off.